I'll bet you are familiar with it just like I was. I knew about immigrant girls coming across the border from Mexico and Latin America, lied to about jobs as a nanny or a waitress, and then they find themselves locked away in the back room of a cantina. I knew about Asian girls who find themselves in similar circumstances, the only difference being they're in the back room of a spa or a nail salon. I knew about the high percentage of foster care kids that wind up getting trafficked. We don't do a good job of taking care of our foster kids. And I know about the runaways. Bless their heart. For whatever reason they chose to run away, statistics show us that within 48 hours on average of them being on the streets, they wind up under the protection of a pimp. Those are the stereotypes of sex trafficking that I've known about for years, and I bet you did too. But there's one more thing that you may not have heard about. If you have a teen and they have a smartphone, your family's at risk. My name's John Clark. Sex trafficking impacted my family in 2016, and it had a devastating impact. It turned our world upside down. No one in our home fit the stereotypes that I spoke about just a moment ago. My 18-year-old high school senior daughter was lured into relationships with people that she thought were her friends, and they weren't. They were bad people and they intended to do her harm. It ended with her getting in the car with the wrong guy. She didn't come home for 8 days. It was the worst 8 days you can imagine as a parent. We were fortunate. We found and rescued our daughter. The road to recovery is long. She's taking it day by day, and she's doing better. Many girls who disappear like our daughter did are written off as just another runaway. The big change in recent years that puts average families like ours at risk is the increase in both supply and demand, and how they're fueled by the internet, smartphones, and social media. The sex trade industry and the criminals who work within it are changing rapidly. Those changes are ensnaring thousands of unsuspecting teenagers from stable homes, churches, and schools all across the country. I'll start with the demand. Deviant desires have been around since as long as man has been on earth. We know that people have been buying sex for thousands of years. But you only have to go back 5 or 10 years to a point in time when there was a big gap between the deviant desire and the transaction to buy. 5 or 10 years ago, you had to drive around in a part of town where it wasn't safe to street corners and pick someone up. You had to go to maybe a dirty hotel or a seedy strip club. Regardless, the buyer had to expose themselves to some risk. They could get caught or they could be seen, and they're not proud of what they do, so they want to remain anonymous. The fear of getting caught in a lot of situations outweighed the deviant desire they had. In 2017, things are very different. You can go online to a site like Backpage, shop around for whatever you want, enter your credit card number, and buy the product you desire. It's become so common that 86% of all transactions for commercial sex acts occur online. The buyer can have the product delivered to a hotel room. They can go to an apartment that's set up specifically for that purpose, or you can have the girl delivered to your door just like a pizza. The buyer remains anonymous. There's very little risk. There's very little exposure. So the people who used to have that fear that outweighed or counterbalanced their desire no longer have that fear. The gap between the desire and the transaction has closed, and that's causing demand to explode. Another thing with the technology and the internet is it allows the traffickers to identify the preferences of the buyers. And guess what? Cute little innocent looking girls from the suburbs are in high demand. As long as that demand is high, there are criminally minded people who will find creative ways to fill the demand. That also puts our families at greater risk than they would have been just a few years ago. Now let's talk about supply. How many of the teens you know have a smartphone? We all know teens have smartphones, and they're on them all the time. They're texting and tweeting and Snapchatting and doing things that we don't even know what they're doing. They're constantly on their screens and we can't see them. What else do they do with their smartphones? They're constantly taking selfies, and they take those selfies and they post them online. No matter how many times we tell our teens not to open up their social media applications to people they don't know well, they don't listen, and they open them to everybody. They post those pictures online, and they're available to anyone who's searching for them. The traffickers are smart. They know our kids all have smartphones and they know the applications they use. They're constantly monitoring those applications and searching for vulnerable teens. They're gifted con men and they know how to recognize social media communications between two people that show signs of vulnerability. And whenever they recognize that vulnerability, that's what they capitalize on. They start communicating with the teens. They do things, they say things that make them feel better about themselves, make them feel good about themselves. And before long, what you find is that your teen has decided to go to a party with a group of friends they barely know. Maybe they decide to go on an out-of-town date with a guy they don't really know. Or they get in the car with the wrong guy. The point is, the traffickers know how to recognize vulnerability and low self-esteem. It's important to know that it's a process that they work over time. They court your child over a long period of time. It's not like you saw in the movie Taken. The traffickers can look like anybody, and they can come from anywhere. They can come from your school, from your church, from your neighborhood. It's impossible to recognize what the trafficker looks like or where they're going to come from, but the process is identifiable. So here's the 6-step process that we saw that occurred in our family. Once a target is identified, it starts with befriend. Befriend is a very simple and innocent step. It's simply the introduction of a new friend to the existing circle of friends. Nothing threatening or dangerous happens during that stage because the whole purpose of the befriend stage is to establish trust. After befriend comes intoxicate. Intoxicate is simply introduce drugs and/or alcohol. If either is already present, it just increases the frequency and/or ease of access. The purpose of the intoxicate stage is to cause friction between the teen and their family. It makes sense because if your child is coming home intoxicated, there's going to be arguments and discussions and grounding and discipline. The traffickers leverage that friction in the next stage, which is alienate. Alienate is when they start to, this friend who's become closer and closer to your child starts to convince your teen that their family life is unbearable, that their parents are terrible, their home life is terrible. I bet you can't wait to get out of that house once you turn 18. If you ever need a place to stay, you can come and stay with me. That type of messaging continues throughout this process. At the same time the alienate stage is going on, which alienate focuses on the family, you have the isolate stage. The isolate stage separates them from their existing friends and introduces new friends. Before long, you find that the kids that you've known for years are no longer hanging out at your house, and the new friends that you see around your child are obviously a bad influence. Next comes the desensitized stage. Desensitize is when the new group of friends who've become so close to your child, it's slowly revealed that many of them are involved in activities that are either illegal or immoral, but regardless, your child knows they're wrong. The purpose of the desensitized stage is to take that moral compass that you've spent your child's entire life building and calibrating, and they want to break it. They want to make things that are illegal or immoral seem normal, like everyday things. Once your child has gone through the desensitized stage, the only thing that's left is capitalize. And capitalize, the point of it, is to take your child. Whether it's after a big fight and the child walks out, or it's after their 18th birthday, or if it's simply getting in the car with the wrong guy. The thought of losing our child is frightening for anyone, but the purpose of this video isn't to frighten you. It's to make you aware of the risk and to prepare you to protect your family. For more information about how to schedule a presentation on this topic or to find resources for a family in need, go to HoustonTexasCan.com. For more information about how to help change laws that will better protect victims and their families, go to OperationTexasShield.com. Together, we can stop sex trafficking.